Thank you very much. I would like to start by congratulating Dame Diana and the All-Party Parliamentary Group for hosting this event and for the launch of your new report. As Equality Now, we are really encouraged that sex trafficking and sexual exploitation are being highlighted as important priorities that need addressing in England and Wales. And we know and hope that this will also raise momentum across the whole of the UK for urgent action on these issues. There is no shortage of ways that people end up in the sex trade, but the constant factor throughout is that it is gendered. Sex and gender-based inequality is at the heart and crux of it. From the global statistics, we know that the majority of trafficked persons are women and girls, and the majority of them are trafficked for sexual exploitation, mainly in prostitution. We also know that sex trafficking is the most common form of human trafficking, and it is also the most lucrative, and globally makes over $99 billion in profit for traffickers and pimps. In addition to gender and sex-based inequality, there are also intersecting inequalities that worsen the situation for women and girls. Women exploited in the sex trade are more likely to have experienced discrimination on the basis of poverty, homelessness, or have been affected by failures in the care system, child sexual abuse, or people that have insecure migrant status, or have experienced racial or ethnic discrimination, or discrimination on the basis of their gender or sex identity. And this is the same in the UK as in other places across the world. We have also seen presently in the context of COVID, how the pandemic has exposed and worsened inequalities and has placed already vulnerable people at even greater risk of sexual exploitation. Often when we think about sexual exploitation and trafficking, and prostitution in particular, we default to thinking just about individual people. Often our first thoughts don't see the industry, an industry that includes many actors who are fueling, sustaining, and benefiting from buying and selling of women and girls' bodies. We may not immediately think of the pimps or traffickers, brothel keepers, or those that are operating websites where vulnerable people are being advertised and sold and bought. And these are the people who run the sex trade and are making huge profits in the process. And we should also think about those who buy sex, because without their money, there would be no industry to speak of. It's important that our analysis of the commercial sex trade also looks at all these systems and conditions that lead to sex trafficking, prostitution, and other forms of sexual exploitation, and that keep exploited people trapped in the system. By so doing, we can come to the conclusion that the sex trade does not just exist because they are vulnerable people. It happens also because there are people who are willing to pay access to women's bodies, and it is with their money that the industry is perpetuated and sustained. They have a sense of entitlement over women's bodies and are willing to abuse their positions of power to take advantage of vulnerability of other people, and are deriving personal sexual gratification from the process. And all of this is occurring within a society that does not treat everyone as equal, and especially does not treat women and girls as equal. The sex trade is therefore a bias market, especially where additional external factors such as global pandemics are exacerbating women's vulnerabilities. And taking all of this into account, we can also come to the conclusion that sexual exploitation in its many forms is a function of sex and gender inequality and abuse of male power and privilege, and therefore it is gender-based violence. The CEDAW committee, in its new general recommendation on trafficking, reinforces the understanding that trafficking and sexual exploitation of women and girls is unequivocally a phenomenon that is rooted in structural sex-based discrimination, and that it constitutes gender-based violence. And as we know, the UK is a signatory to the CEDAW Convention. Gender-based violence cannot be overcome or navigated at an individual level. it really requires a holistic and whole society approach. And in the context of sex trafficking and sexual exploitation, we need to ensure that our laws and policies enshrine the following. They should be aspects of prevention. And we can do this by ensuring that our laws and policies address the gender and systemic inequalities that lead to vulnerabilities. Our laws and policies must also ensure protection and ensuring that those who are exploited are not criminalized, but rather supported, included being provided with exit services. And our laws and policies must also look at accountability and address impunity by making it a criminal offense to buy sex. Buying sex is exploitation, and without the buyer's demand, the sex trade would not exist and thrive. So in order to achieve gender equality and to put an end to sexual exploitation, it is essentially critical that we address the issue of demand. We also need to ensure accountability through the law beyond traffickers, other exploiters that are benefiting and profiteering from the sex trade. So we're talking of pimps, brothel keepers, and in today's digital age, the law should also make tech platforms and these websites where women are being advertised accountable for enabling sexual exploitation to occur. So this is the equality model with all those different aspects, which acknowledges that sexual exploitation is grounded in sex and gender-based inequality and discrimination, and points to the need for any government to adopt a holistic and joined-up approach to ensure that we address these issues for women and girls in all spheres of life, from birth and throughout the life cycle, as a way of reducing as well their vulnerability to exploitation. The equality model is also challenging male entitlement to women's bodies and their so-called right to buy sex, and and it also helps to prevent the continuum of violence against women. It is also about sending a very strong message to society that coercing and purchasing sexual access to women's bodies is not acceptable, and that our government is committed to supporting victims of gender-based violence, and that our society should become a much more gender equal society. And as we have heard before, this legislative model has been adopted in other countries, Sweden, Northern Ireland, France, Canada, and so on. And there have been tremendous results since the adoption of the law, of their laws. And in conclusion, we know from the government policies that the UK government has already made the commitment to address gender-based violence and violence against women, and has acknowledged that it is unacceptable in our society. So the government must be bold in its approach to tackling gender inequality and gender-based violence. And as such, it follows that the UK must adopt the equality model. It's an approach that must be adopted across all the 4 nations. And we've seen Northern Ireland has already paved the way. And we hope that we can galvanize sufficient political will to make this a reality in England and Wales and Scotland as well. Thank you.